Good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to see lots of people here after we've all been apart for so many months. It's personally my first in-person event for 18 months, so it's lovely to see so many faces. And joining us here for what is proving to be a very interesting discussion at a time when our red meat supply chains are increasingly vulnerable. So demand for locally sourced meat soared during lockdown, and to be able to meet demand for this meat, we obviously have to have a thriving network of local abattoirs. And in recent years, small abattoirs have been declining at very worrying levels. So in the coming months ahead and in the coming years, we're obviously going to be undergoing transformational change within agriculture as we look to change the direction of travel for agricultural subsidies as we move away from the Common Agricultural Policy. And that's going to be very much towards producing food sustainably, but along with environmental credentials. And a lot of that has to be about producing food locally and making that sustainable. And obviously, we're looking to a future where direct subsidies are going to be phased out. So we're going to have to be adding value to our products. And that means having to guarantee access for many people in this room to local abattoirs, which can access private kills. So this and much more we're going to be discussing today. And I'm going to introduce a fantastic panel we have here. I'll go through one at a time and they'll do a brief discussion. And first of all, I'm going to introduce Ellie Burnage, who has come up this morning from Hertfordshire. This morning. She is the head of external affairs at the Prince's Countryside Fund. She's been there since 2017 and she leads communications, research, events and fundraising. She's very busy, and this summer she project managed and developed the launch of the A to Z glossary, which is effectively a farmer's guide to some of the jargon around the environment, all the jargon that we're used to hearing, carbon sequestration terms that the media throw out, media reporters like myself. So she's been very involved with that, and today she's going to talk us through a report the Prince's Countryside Fund released this August on the sustainability of local red meat abattoirs. So over to you, Ellie.
Okay. I can try. There we go. Yes, to look at the decline of UK abattoirs, we brought together abattoir owners, butchers, grocers and farmers to look at the context in which red meat abattoirs were operating, the specific situation facing small abattoirs, and to explore their future sustainability and what we could do on a practical level. The output of that roundtable was this piece of research carried out by Dr. Franks at the University of Newcastle, and it forms part of the Prince's Countryside Fund's work supporting family farms. For us, the need to support a diverse abattoir sector is clear, so that farmers can have access to a range of abattoirs offering a wide range of services to support your farming ambitions, whatever they might be. The three main objectives of the research was to identify the place and context of small and local abattoirs in the wider red meat supply chain, to look at the viability of small abattoirs and provide evidence of their economic and environmental benefits, and to look at specific measures as to how we can therefore support these smaller abattoirs. Some of the key findings. So as we are all aware, there's been a serious decline in the number of UK red meat abattoirs from 1,146 in 1979 to just 213 in August 2020. Of which only 147 now offer private kill. As I'm sure we all know, a network of abattoirs is needed to maintain a diversity of UK farm systems and food production. Economies of scale have led to an increase in the number of larger, more specialist abattoirs, tending to slaughter maybe only one or two species. There are only 23 abattoirs in Scotland at the moment. Small abattoirs, as we all know, tend to slaughter more species, with 13 abattoirs in the UK currently slaughtering over 90,000 animals each year. Our research showed that the existing provision of private kill services fails to provide farmers with competitive terms and conditions, with competitive price, or a preferred range of butchery services. Most farmers that we spoke to only had one abattoir within reasonable driving distance that they could use. 41% of our respondents said they have no alternative abattoir that they can use should their current one close, and 20% of farmers have no access to an abattoir offering private kill services, which means that if they want to go into their own sort of open up their own farm shop or similar, they just don't have the option to do so. We also discovered that the closure of an abattoir offering private kill tends to increase farm costs by roughly 30%. Over half of our respondents said that access to private kill was essential or very important to the viability of their farm business. And so abattoir closure adds pressure at an already difficult time for agriculture, is really the last thing that farmers working the red meat supply chain need right now. On an animal welfare point, animal welfare and distance travelled were the most important factors in choosing an abattoir for the farmers that we spoke to. 3/4 of farmers prioritise animal welfare over all other factors, including price, when choosing their abattoir. The average distance travelled smaller abattoirs was 27 miles, so this supports local food systems and is less than half the average distance travelled to what this report deems commercial businesses, so larger abattoirs you might be contracting to. I'm sure Christopher will talk about this more, but 3/4 of farmers who use private kill finish rare or native breeds, and so the reduction in the number of UK abattoirs contributes to, the reduction in these abattoirs impacts farmers' abilities to contribute to conserving genetic diversity and species biodiversity, and therefore maintaining the UK's distinctive rural landscapes, which can be considered a public good, which again is going to be incredibly important over the coming years. Looking more at the economics, we found that most abattoirs we surveyed don't have a choice for their waste removal services, so that completely takes away competition, increases their own costs. Several abattoirs supply their own butcher shops, but there was a real mixture between those whose butcher shops supported the abattoir financially and those who the abattoir supported the butcher shops. And what we discovered when speaking to abattoir owners and managers was that there's not really, unfortunately, a clear and simple solution to how they can become more economically viable. It's so context specific. It depends on where they're based, depends on how many other abattoirs are local to them, what sort of animals are being farmed nearby to them. 1/10 of abattoirs we surveyed hadn't been profitable for the last 3 years, however, which is obviously a very concerning statistic. We also looked at the existence of local food brands. So we discovered that in consumers' opinion, this tends to mean that their food is better quality, the welfare is higher, and it's more environmentally sustainable. As I'm sure many of you know, independent butchers saw a huge increase in custom during the COVID-19 pandemic, and we are hopeful that this will be sustained. But helping to promote these local food brands and really reconnecting the consumer with where their food comes from and the benefits provided by having the farmer kind of involved the entire way through the animal's life and death is so important. Our research also showed, however, that large abattoirs can offer private kill, but the closure of more small abattoirs would reduce butchering services available, so the farmers wouldn't necessarily be able to get back the cuts they wanted. There was also quite a significant concern about whether you're getting your own animal back, and also access to fifth quarter produce if you want to kind of do more with that. Also, should large abattoirs start offering more private kill services, obviously that will take custom away from small abattoirs. It would significantly impact the service available, price competition, and therefore impact farm businesses. The knock-on issues of this, which aren't talked about quite as much, is therefore the reduction of emergency slaughter provision, the reduction in animal welfare standards through longer journeys and the use of large-scale commercial transporters, and reducing the provision of environmental goods from land such as carbon sequestration, genetic diversity, conservation, grazing, and the general appearance of mixed livestock farms to the UK, and that really obviously makes up the beautiful countryside that people are so fond of. So overall, this would significantly impact the ability to provide locally produced food. It would affect our landscape character and ultimately restrict the economic growth in rural areas. The report made a number of recommendations. The 3 that I've sort of chosen to look at here is that the government should better monitor the impact and number of abattoir closures. One significant frustration when we were compiling this research was that there's just not a good data source on what's happening with abattoirs. You have to look at all sorts of different people. It can be very difficult to figure out what's actually going on. That food standard organisations really need to consider the impact of regulations on small abattoirs. They should work with abattoir owners to make sure that regulation is proportionate and appropriate for what slaughterhouses are doing. We also looked at the specific situation of island abattoirs. So part of how this came about was that we've worked with the abattoir in Mull when they need to replace their pig stunner. There was nothing wrong with their old one, regulations changed, and they suddenly had to find the cash to buy a new one at great expense, which we supported them to do. But obviously, island abattoirs need to receive specific government support to recognise their contribution to farming on the islands and animal welfare. And finally, the abattoirs should be supported by a fully financed abattoirs group. I'm very pleased, again, I'm sure Christopher can talk about this more, but an abattoir sector group has been set up looking at this specific issue, and we are keen to help support them in some way if we can. I think what's really came through from this, though, is that action needs to be immediate. What we discovered when looking at the rate of closures is that if it continues at the same pace it has done, by the middle of next year, 20% of farmers in the UK won't have access to an abattoir offering private kill, and obviously that would be devastating for the UK red meat supply chain.
Thank you very much, Ellie. Some very concerning figures in there, and I'm sure it's something that is prompting lots of questions from the audience. And after I've introduced everybody, I'll go around and hopefully we'll have some hands up and we'll get some, not just questions, but even it would be quite nice to hear some points of interest and maybe experiences that some of you might have had with your local abattoir as well. But thank you, Ellie. And up next we have Christopher Price. Christopher has travelled here from Worcestershire, and he has been at the helm of the Rare Breed Survival Trust for 2.5 years now. And his work is about promoting rare breeds. And I'm sure he's going to talk to us a bit more about this in detail, but native livestock, they make economic sense given the direction of travel for Scottish agriculture and the changes in the years ahead. So that's something we'll be really interested to talk about today. And he's been involved with agri-policy for 20 years now. Thanks, Christopher.
Okay, thank you, Claire. And actually, before I start talking about the debate, I just want to go and say how much I'm enjoying this event. It seems to me fantastic. It's been, best part of 2 years since we've last been able to get out and see each other and do things. And for the first thing to come to be this, where there's so many enthusiastic, entrepreneurial people all trying to go and do the right thing and make money at the same time, it really is quite inspirational stuff. So huge congratulations to the organisers, and thanks so much for inviting me to be a small part of it. Anyway, I'm Chief Executive of the Rare Breed Survival Trust, and I hope you've heard of us, but if not, we, as the name suggests, exist to conserve and promote our native livestock and equine breeds. Why do we do that? Well, 3 principal reasons. Firstly, because native livestock and equines are part of our natural history, part of our biodiversity, in just the same way as all the other things we're supposed to be conserving, seagulls, beavers, what have you. It's all part of nature, it's all part of that sort of thing which makes life exciting and special. Secondly, they are part of our landscape. There is something exciting, rewarding about seeing native breeds in the places they're meant to be. Yesterday I was down the road looking at Geordie Soutar's native Angus. These are cattle that came into being in a particular landscape for a particular purpose. There's a huge cultural history attached to them as well, and you get that across the country as a whole. And it's not just the sort of the historical attachment, it's the visual element as well. So many of these animals look exciting, they look interesting. There's lots of other animals which are also exciting and interesting, but you can't get up close to them, and they don't really have the same grounding in the landscape that livestock do. But perhaps the most important reason for conserving native breeds, which Claire's already alluded to, is because they make economic sense. Our native breeds started coming under threat when farming became more industrialised, more intensive, more dependent on the sort of subsidies that we saw through the CAP. It made sense to feed large amounts of grain or what have you to animals to make them grow bigger, faster, indoors, and that worked for a while, but it's arguably, but it's not the future. As you heard, we're leaving the EU. And this isn't a political point, but we are leaving the EU. We will be leaving the Common Agricultural Policy. It is unlikely that subsidies are going to be paid either on the same basis as they have historically or in the same quantity as they have historically. As we know, it's unlikely that we'll have the same sort of trade benefits through the EU that we've had for the last, whatever it is, 40, 50 years. There's a huge amount of change going on, and farmers are going to have to start thinking about doing things differently. First of all, it'll be more important to go and keep input costs down. As I hope many of you will have seen, over the summer RBST did a survey of native breed farmers, trying to go and get some data to back up some of what we've said. Actually, Claire reported it quite extensively in Scottish Farmer. But one of the things we got from that was that of people who had experience of keeping both continental breeds and native breeds, 79% reckoned that the input costs were significantly lower with native breeds. And that makes sense. Now, after all, these breeds were bred to thrive in our landscape. They can live outdoors on grass. They're kept at an appropriate density where they don't need the huge vet and med bills that you will often associate with continental breeds kept in confined circumstances. So on the input side, it makes sense, but it's also on the sale side as well. If you're savvy at marketing, and to make a go of farming in the future, I think you will need to be savvy at marketing. The days where you can just say, I produce beef, someone's got to buy my beef, have gone. You're going to have to go and do more than that. But if you can do more to promote the sense of place, the lower environmental footprint, the higher welfare standards, these are all things that you can do to go and build a brand going forward, which must be the future. And again, in our survey, 42% of people who responded said that they thought they could charge a premium through keeping native livestock and marketing them appropriately. But if any of this is going to work, we need to have the right infrastructure in place, and that's really the rub with all of this. We have an extensive abattoir network across the UK. There are loads of places where you can get animals killed and processed. And I don't know if any of you were at Groundswell, the big regenerative agriculture conference that happens in England, Hertfordshire, every year. But George Eustace, the English agriculture minister, was speaking, and the person who was interviewing him challenged him on abattoirs, and he said, he'd looked at the figures, and there is sufficient capacity for all the livestock that need to be processed he was talking about England, but I'm sure the same point would apply here. There was sufficient capacity, and he's probably right. There are a sufficient number of units. But the point he was missing is that if we're talking about native breeds, the current infrastructure just doesn't work. We need places that can process small numbers of non-standard animals, returning the fifth quarter, and do so to the highest welfare standards, because those are all part of the brand. They're all part of the business that underpin semi-native breed farming. It's all very well having somewhere that can take 100 head of some boring pink pig, but if it can't process something with black, thick skin, hairy skin, or with big horns, or what have you, it's of no use. There's no point in having that sort of thing. So what do we do about it? Well, I think there's a number of things. I mean, first of all, and I really don't want to go and sound like another organisation that says government's got to pay for things, but I am going to say government's got to pay for things. This isn't about long-term subsidy. It's not about sustaining an otherwise unsustainable industry. But bearing in mind the amount of flux that agriculture is going to go through in the next few years, I don't think it's that unreasonable to say that Scottish Government should invest or provide short-term capital investment to set up the sort of abattoirs we are talking about, to help farmers cope with an unsubsidised, more market-facing world. It's one-off investment in structural change. It's not about propping up an otherwise inefficient industry. What else? Well, I think there's an obligation on us as well. The temptation must be, if there is an abattoir that will take your animals not too far away at a reasonable cost, to go and take them to that premises. But if there is a smaller place that does the right thing, that is operating ethically, that will go and provide all the services I said about processing non-standard animals and returning the fifth quarter at a high welfare standard, then we need to be helping those guys. Even if it's a bit of a pain for us, if it will help support them, we need to be doing it. We can't complain that the good abattoir is gone if we haven't used it. So, those are really the two things I'm saying. We desperately need a comprehensive network of local abattoirs that can take our sort of animals. We need short-term government capital finance to help us get there, and we've got to go and do the right thing ourselves, which is to use our sustainable local abattoir if there is one available for us to use. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Christopher. And next on our panel, we have Jane Prentice. Jane and her husband, Bob, moved to Downfield Farm just outside Cooper in 2002. And in 2015, they diversified their fattening cow operation into keeping deer. And they put a home abattoir in their operation, which is going to be very interesting hearing about that today. And in 2016, they added on a butchery larder. And in 2019, they've expanded this so they can hold pig and sheep carcasses too. I won't say anything else more, but I'll pass over to Jane.
Is this on? No. Is it? You hear me now? Yep. Hi, yes, I'm Jane Prentice. My husband and I run Downfield Abattoir, which is just outside Cooper in Fife. We have many of you smallholders as our customers. And as Claire said, we started this operation in 2015. We moved into looking at finishing deer about 2012, so it wasn't just an immediate thing that we went and done. And the nearest abattoir for farm deer, and it still is for the public, is in Dovecote Park, which is just outside York, which we decided was too far. So we looked, with the help at that time of food standards, what we needed to do. We converted a building on the farm just after, I think it was about a year after St Andrew's Abattoir had closed, so we managed to sort of reuse some equipment. Again, I think Halls of Broxburn was timeous as well. It had just closed. We reused panels from that, and we built it ourselves with no government help. And it's still operational. It still passes food standards regulations at the moment, although, as you say, things change. We've had to recently put in CCTV for all the animal welfare regulations at point of kill. We added on a butchery and a game larder to be able to handle wild deer for butchery in 2016 that was, sorry. And we did get a food processing and marketing grant that helped with that capital cost. But our customers come from all over Scotland, and there is the need for more abattoirs in Scotland, especially for the private kills. What else? The demands, we originally started with the farm deer. Quite quickly we had to add on a license for sheep, which was immediately noticeable that customers had nowhere to go for that. It was another license for goats, and then another license in the butchery to do mincing and burgers, sausages. It's all licenses, it's all regulation, it's all procedures, it's all paperwork. My husband Bob is a licensed slaughterman, and everyone has to comply with a lot of legislation, a lot of regulation, and to set up more abattoirs is just not going to happen immediately. So,
Thanks, Jane. I think that's very interesting, and that's something smallholders, farmers, crofters, we're always used to hearing about is more paperwork, and I'm sure that is something that will come up in discussions later. Fourth on our panel today, we've got, hold on a second, Stuart Minnick here, sorry Stuart. So Stuart has been a butcher for 37 years, and he originally started out working alongside his father. They opened a shop in Tayport. And in 2010, he decided to go it alone, and he has since grown his business to now have 9 retail shops and 2 concessions. And just before we started, was telling me that could be 10. So could be 10. So watch this space, Stuart.
Is this working? Yes? No? No? That's a good start. I don't really know why I'm here. I'm a high street butcher. We started a long time ago. We've got out the trade, we came back into the trade. My father had a stroke in the butcher shop we had in Tayport. I didn't really want to see the inside of a butcher shop again. Obviously forward planning, that was 30 years ago. Here I am with 9 butcher shops. If I've got any sort of passions in life, it's the high street butcher. I am a high street butcher, that's what I do, that's what I am. For years and years, people have been telling us the high street butcher's dead and buried. Well, I hope I don't swear, but after the shitstorm hit, people started suddenly thinking about what they were eating, where it was coming from, what they were doing with it. And it sounds terrible, it was such a terrible time, but it absolutely focused on my business, focused right in on my business. We've expanded the way we do the business. We call ourselves artisan butchers. That seems really pretentious. All that means is that I'm doing it the same way my dad taught me to do it, which is whole sides of beef, whole sheep, whole pigs. You waste nothing. Waste to my father was an, big word coming, anathema. It's all about money. And it is all about money. I'm not here to, rah for what we used to call tree huggers and all that stuff. I'm not really, I can see people cringing already. My take, and I'll be quite blunt, my take is I've got 37 wages to pay. That's my responsibility. And I want to see my butcher shops thriving. There are towns all over Fife and Tayside that wouldn't have a butcher shop but for the way me and my team are doing it. We've got apprentices, we're keeping the thing alive, and by the grace of God, and that sounds silly, but by the grace of God, people are starting to think about what they're eating. They want to know where it's coming from. I work down south with luminaries like the Kindersleys and Jodie Schechter, and I was really into organics in a big way for a long time. It was fascinating. I don't think that's the case so much now, but people really, really want to know where their food's coming from. They want a story. It's not a story, not a makey-up story, they want a real story. Provenance, different breeds. Now, again, I'd love to say it's all part of my master plan for global domination. It's just chance. We've got a big operation now. We are a reasonably big player in the retail trade. We've got a lovely unit up at Abernethy, so we've got proper butchers doing proper jobs, cutting down proper beef and sheep and pigs. And we can take that out to our shops, so we can focus on, butchers are costing me 500 quid a week take home. I have to get that money in. This isn't a hobby, and I'm not saying it's a hobby for people out there. I'm just an ordinary high street butcher. I'm passionate about what we do, and one of the things that I'm loving this is the bulk of my beef comes from one guy. It's big Conti crosses that most people would run a mile from here. The beef is really good. It's about 8 miles from Shotts abattoir, so the transport from farm to abattoir is minimal. I really didn't care how long it takes to get it back because it's dead. People don't seem to get ahead of that. It's all food miles, but the animal welfare is tip top. I use the apprentices, great stuff. But the crucial thing from my experience is people want to know where it's coming from. They want to know that. One of the things that we're finding, again, I'm fortunate, I can use my big Conti crosses for the bulk of my trade, but we can get rare breeds, we can get Highlanders, we can get Belties, we can get rare types, and we can sell them because we're proper butchers, and people are really interested. That's what really gets them going. We got in a couple of Dexters 5 weeks ago, put them up on our Facebook. They were all sold before they even hit the shops. And, crucially, because I'm not an altruistic, this is for the greater good of mankind, we can get a margin on that because it's different. We can tell that story. We can make everything. We can make beef dripping out of Dexter beef and charge £3 a tub for it, and folk will buy it because it's different and it's good and it's special. So, you know, I don't know if that makes any sense whatsoever, but that's me. I'm a high street butcher, and places like this are great. I would add one wee codicil, one wee thing. The whole bit about the abattoirs. You're not going to get a network of abattoirs that are going to handle horned cattle, hairy pigs. I just didn't see how it can work. What we can do, we can use what we've got better and work with it. In Canada, New Zealand, they have trucks that you take around the farms. Why is nobody doing that here? Also, I get cattle killed at ABP in Perth. Now, the government's throwing, I don't know, I'm saying this, I shouldn't say that, I can't quote facts. There seems to be a lot of money going into ABP from someplace. They do work for me. I get cattle slaughtered there. I know Jane does as well. They're not friendly about it, but it's there. Let's use it better. Shots shut for COVID about 4 weeks ago, and it was like a shitstorm hit the world because all the wee guys, butchers like me, were just suddenly, oh, and it was a oh. But we've got a lot of stuff there already. Can we not use it better? That's my thought. Hope I haven't sworn too much.
Just the right amount. And I think you're a valuable member of our panel. I'm sure we'll all agree, and I'm sure a lot of your comments there prompted lots of thoughts as well for the discussion to follow. Our final panellist today, we have Evan Katulis, who's joined us from Food Standards Scotland. So Evan is involved with the official veterinarian team, and he's been involved with the approving and auditing new premises. I'm sure, again, that adds another dynamic to our talks today. Evan.
So, thank you very much. So my name is Evangelos Katsoulis, but please call me Evan. I'm originally from Greece. I moved here 5 years ago, and more or less all these 5 years I was part of the official veterinarians team, providing official controls over abattoirs and cutting plants as well. I've worked in the south of Scotland, around Glasgow. I started in an abattoir down in Dumfries, and now I've moved to Dundee, and I'm covering this area, so mid-Scotland and a bit up north as well. So in the past 2 years I've been involved with approvals and audits, so approving newly built premises as well as premises that already exist that decided to add extra activities under their license. As a matter of fact, I also worked with Jane as well during the last edition of their, if I remember correctly, was meat products, wasn't it, Jane? So I'm more or less here today just to provide a point of view of the official controls part and the regulations, and I'm very excited for this.
Thank you very much. I was just going to ask everyone to stand up for a second because it's really cold in here. Everyone stand up. I don't know if it's just me, but I'm looking at people wearing t-shirts as well, and I'm concerned about us keeping warm. So please do get up and move around a little bit as we go on. I was warned to wear warm clothing. I don't know about the rest of you. So anyway, but so we've heard from 5 very different individuals who are going to offer a huge amount of interesting discussion today. Before, I'm going to ask a question, but is there any burning questions you want to raise your hand? And I hear there are people that are going to come round and speak to you. Is there any first questions I can take? Or shall I start us off then? Right, okie dokie. Trying to find something that you can all answer. Okay, so let's go for something very broad then. Ellie, you said at the beginning there that we need, immediate action. I think it was you said something like the middle of next year, 20% of people won't be able to access private kills. What is the one-stop thing that we can do, given the fact that we're coming out of a pandemic where purse strings are much tighter than usual? So if we're asking for support for something right now, I know we're not going to go too much into the political side of things, but what is the immediate action that we can really take to improve supply of local abattoirs?
Well, as Christopher said, it's for people to use them. If you've got animals that you want to process, use your local abattoir, invest in that economy. And for consumers, it's buying local meat. You do have that greater reassurance about how it's been reared and where it's come from. You don't have to cast your mind back too far to think about the horse meat scandal and all of those other things. And as we look towards a more sustainable future, obviously everyone's got COP26 on their mind in the next couple of weeks. Eating locally reared food is one of the best things you can do for the planet, particularly in the UK.
Okay, so it's more about us actually using what's on our doorstep as well. Okay, Stuart, what would you add to that?
Pretty well covers it. Well done. Going forward, it's it's all about sustainability, and I'm not that sort of a butcher, but I am that sort of a butcher. We can't keep putting whatever it is, 10 kilos of grain into cattle to produce 1 kilo of beef. It's not going to happen. And more we're facing up to the non-meat products. So there is a huge change. I worry about people thinking we're going to suddenly get a raft of new abattoirs. I really do. I just didn't think it's going to happen. I've seen what it's like for Jane up at Jane. It's onerous. It's just really onerous. So have I got any answers? Not really. Just keep supporting your local butcher.
Yeah, and I guess that we should all be supporting our local butcher. I'm sure that doesn't need to be said to people in this room. I'm sure we all do, but it is a message to get out there to the wider public. But there was a report done recently that I think it said around 90% of farmers are in favour of mobile abattoirs, and obviously that's going to involve costs, and Stuart's made the point there that if we can build on what we already have, and that's something I'm sure we'll all have different opinions of as well. I mean, obviously, Jane, you've set up your own abattoir. There's a lot of regulation involved in that and costs too. I mean, there's something you can maybe share a little bit about that, what that was like. And
Yeah, I mean, we set up the abattoir, as I say, initially for the farm deer. We envisaged it 1-2 days a week. We had Bob qualified as a slaughterman, and we had another slaughterman stroke butcher. We then have come in such a short time to basically 5 days a week, 2 slaughtermen, 3 and an apprentice butcher, and another half dozen staff. We're at capacity at 70 animals a week. We kill on a Monday afternoon and Tuesday. We're fully booked with bookings for 2022 and 2023. So, the demand is there. The regulation is there. It's food safety. I understand it's got to be there. But it's a lot for a small abattoir where we have, with our 70 animals, we could have, 20 customers. You take a large abattoir, they'll do 70 animals in less than an hour, and it's probably for one customer, one piece of paper, where we've got 20. And that's where we probably do need the support. And if a lot of the smallholders, everybody wants to add value individually rather than in bulk, it will need support. It will need government financial support to do it, or more people, foolish people like us probably, who support it almost ourselves, subsidising it ourselves. So it's not. It needs to have a different model. ABP are brilliant in the fact that they do private kills for our customers 1 day a week, and we can collect the beef from there, but it's not everybody that can fit into that category. If they've got horned cattle, it has to go somewhere else. It's the same with, with somewhere like Shotts. If it's a big pig, it can't go there either. It's got to go somewhere else. Something that doesn't just quite fit in the box needs a bit of support into somewhere else to provide that.
Thank you. And what would you say, Christopher, in terms of, is it a case of investing in places we've already got so they can take on like your horned cattle and your heavy different coats as well? What would you say?
It's not about more It's not about more abattoirs, it's about having the right sort of abattoirs, as we've heard. Ones that can take thick skins, horns, return the fifth quarter, and all the other things that the panel have mentioned. Stuart said he can't see that happening. I can, and I think I can see it happening because of what's the bigger picture. livestock farming, along with all farming, is going to have to change. Partly because as we come out of the EU, subsidies are going to go, and farmers aren't going to be able to go and compete on global commodity markets in the way they have done for the 40 odd years we've been in the EU. They're going to have to start thinking much more about their brand, about managing costs, etc. And that means they will start keeping different sort of animals for the reason that I said when I first spoke. And the abattoir network will have to follow that. There's no point in having an abattoir which is set up to go and take 100 standard animals if your customers have all got half a dozen non-standard animals. And that's going to be a change. And with any structural economic change, I suggest that there is a role for government in helping those affected get through this. As a country, we're not great at structural change. If you think about what happened to mining and to the steelworks, the scale of change that we're going to see in farming is, I would say, comparable to that. We've got to go and find ways to go and help people get through that journey, and it's going to be difficult. A lot of people won't make it. Their businesses won't be able to continue. But for those who've got the right attitude and the sort of optimism that underpins all that, I think we have to go and support them in meeting this brave new world. And this isn't, as I want to emphasise, about propping up unsustainable industries. It's just about helping them getting from A to B, from a heavily subsidised, heavily regulated sector to being an unsubsidised, more market-facing sector. And I think if that happens, we'll get a long way down that journey. Of course, it's not just for government, and we've heard a lot about the fact that purchasers, consumers, need to go and seek out the right sort of meat from the right sort of places. But there's also something, I think, here for abattoir owners themselves. We spend a lot of time bashing farmers for not being sufficiently businesslike and entrepreneurial, and sadly, some of that is true, although not nearly as true as you often hear it said. But there's a bit of that with abattoir owners as well. Abattoir owners have to become more commercial, more in tune to what their customers, both those who supply the animals and those who want the meat, are after as well. That does have to be that sort of scale of change. But my indication is that people are up to it, up for it, sorry. Up to it and up for it. And it's sort of going in the right direction. Claire mentioned the abattoir sector group. This was something we set up probably a year ago because we felt there were so many different organisations lobbying on abattoir-related issues, and none of us were really getting anywhere. We were making a lot of noise, but not getting much traction. So we set up this group that involves us in RBST, Sustainable Food Trust, the Craft Butchers Association, I think Pasture for Life have just joined as well. So we speak with one voice, and that gives us more weight talking to governments, both in Westminster, Holyrood, Cardiff, and Belfast. And hopefully we will get some traction that way. So I think that answered what you were saying, albeit with several other points in there as well.
So Evan, I'm coming to you finally on this, and it's very interesting because obviously you're involved with the auditing and approval side of abattoirs as well. So for you, is the answer to be approving more abattoirs, or is it to be building in capacity? I mean, what's your take on this?
So over the last few years since I've started with the approvals, I've seen a bit more of the increase on the cutting plant point side rather than the abattoir one. I've been in a few abattoirs that have added extra activities, like with downfield farms. To be honest, from my point of view, is more or less the food safety one. I'm not involved with funding. I'm not involved with any of these of the other stuff. So my job there is just to make sure all the premises follow the food safety regulations, which are still the EU ones. This hasn't changed even after Brexit. But to be honest, I've seen a slight increase. For example, we had a very good example that we had earlier this year that still hasn't finished yet, is the abattoir in the Isle of Arran. There's a small abattoir that's going to be built there just for the slaughter of farm deer, so they don't have to move from the island to the mainland to be slaughtered, which is more to the point that was already discussed. So from my point of view, just to answer the question, basically, local abattoirs, like the Downfield one, for example, and I've seen some others, for example, that would be like Carmichael Abattoir down in the south that deals with farm deer as well and sheep too. It's these and Downfield are the only farm deer ones I've seen. I don't think there's any more there are any more in Scotland, to be honest. So from my point of view, yes, it would be a good idea to see more local ones. And I know there have been talks about mobile abattoirs as well. I don't know how this is going to work. From our side, either even if it's a mobile one or one that's in one place, the regulations are there for both. There's no difference from our point of view. So the process is still the same. Doesn't matter what the premises is. So yes, more local ones would be a nice change, to be honest.
I'm coming to the audience now. Is there any burning questions? Jane, I think I'm going to direct this one at you. Talk us through the initial process.
The initial process, I think, where you would put it, and the main thing to get right from the start is the flow. You know, to get the animals in, the waste out, and keep going cleaner and cleaner till you've got your finished carcass at the end of the day, ready for inspection by Evan and his staff. We have spoken to other people all over the UK that have maybe initially looked at mobile abattoirs, or I think there was on the Isle of Wight there was someone talking about setting up an abattoir. And the layout is the initial first thing to get right, and the procedures. And yes, you know, we've helped at the moment. I don't know at what part of my more than 24 hours a day I would try and find minutes to help, but I mean we try and help everyone as much as we can. So I am. You can send an email, but don't wait too long, and I might have to wait a wee bit longer in a response. But that's the initial sort of thing, is to get your head around the sort of layout, and then where it would go within your facility, or within a facility, or create a new facility.
In terms of regulations, licenses, emissions.
I mean, your regulations at abattoir, it has to comply with food standards. Licensing, you have to have people that are licensed to do it. I'm not sure, I've never actually tried to recruit a slaughterman before. We trained our guys and got them qualified as slaughtermen. But the services out there as regards to like waste collection and all the rest of it, they're there. You've got other companies out there that are experienced in building and the chill facilities and all the rest of it, so that there are other companies out there to help as well.
Has there been much interest in like a home abattoir, Evan? Is that something, has there been, in terms of what Jane's doing, has there been, what is the recent interest in that?
From what I've seen the last year and the year before, as I said, there haven't been many applications. I don't know how and when that is going to change, to be honest. Then I'm not have any predictions around that. But to answer your question, from a regulations point of view, whenever you think of applying for a abattoir, cutting plant, anything of that sort, the process goes that the application is sent to Food Standards Scotland, and then we come back to you, and we can offer some consultation to the process, like the example I gave about the Isle of Arran abattoir. We're in talks with a food business operator, and we're constantly helping with them. And to reinforce that, actually, we at Food Standards Scotland got in contact with the local veterinary team in Isle of Arran to be trained as official veterinarians to to provide constant cover to the side of the business, so no one has to actually travel from mainland to the island, and that creates a whole other sort of issues. So after you've applied and after this process has started, the whole process can take up to 6 months to get full approval, and that means basically somewhere from 3 to more visits to the premises to actually make sure that all the regulations are followed, and with constant help to the food business operators.
Mm-hmm. And apart from yourself, is there anyone else in the room that would consider or would be thinking about looking to have an abattoir set up on their own premises? Is that something anyone else would be considering here? Okay. Maybe you'll be able to pass on contact details though, Jane, afterwards. But of course, I mean, we've heard about regulations, obviously staff as well. I mean, you've just said there, Jane, that you've trained up your staff as slaughterman. Bob obviously took on his licence too, and we know that it's getting increasingly difficult to recruit people into these roles, which could obviously put people off as well. I'm sure shortages are something we will cover. Is there any other questions I can take? Lady just there.
Hi, my name's Bruce. I live in Longdale. I'm one of Jane's customers. She does a fantastic job for us. But I am booked in for 2022 and 2023 because of the demand around small abattoirs. Can I just say that this is fantastic that we're having this conversation, and I would really urge people to use their voice, because what we're talking about here is the way that Scotland can be, small farms supporting biodiversity. But actually we need to lobby government, and we need to tell people about what is missing from this sector that can really support the low carbon economy, the green economy that we're all aiming to achieve. And I would really urge people to talk about this conversation, but also there's a consultation that Manny Goodwin has out at the moment about economic recovery for Scotland. And actually use your voice to actually lobby Scotland Food and Drink about smallholders, about small businesses that are producing fantastic food but actually don't have the support, because the support is going to big agricultural farming businesses, and the support that people like Jane to set up that kind of business is just not there, as it's not there for lots of different parts of the smallholder sector. So that's what I would just encourage people to make your voice heard and contact people.
I think that's a very interesting point, and I think we're all very aware at the moment that farming's voice has been lost quite a lot in political discussions. What's been happening recently, obviously earlier last week we heard about the trade deal with New Zealand, and there's real concerns from farmers in terms of restrictions within that deal that are going to protect our farmers. So we need to get better as an industry. We are part of an echo chamber, and I think a lot of us within, whether we're smallholders, whether we're farmers, we are speaking to our own a lot of the time, and there is a missing link in that conversation, making sure farmers' voice is heard. I think that is something very interesting that obviously we need to be at the table for those discussions. COP26, we've not really touched on it, but is farming going to be missing in action in talks where farm is going to be on the front line with climate change? So how do we raise our voice more collectively? Ellie, I'll come to you first on that one.
So one initiative that the Prince's Countryside Fund runs is called the Farm Support Group Initiative, and the way that we work is we've got a fantastic lady called Diane who works with the 44 plus regional local farmer networks all around the UK. She has regular meetings with all of these groups, they feed into her, and then Diane takes that information to DEFRA, to the other UK governments, to make sure that family farms' voices are heard on the larger scale. As has been said, we need to make our voices heard. We need to bring people together to do so. The main pillar of the PCF's work is about representing family farms and trying to make sure that family farms can have a future, supporting them economically, supporting them to become more sustainable, whatever it is they might need. So I would say do get out there, engage with people, come find out more about my charity if you want to. But it is not just working in isolation, having the conversations and sharing your thoughts and what you think needs to happen.
And I think also, I'm going to come to you next year, going back to your opening statement earlier about why you invited onto this panel, I think it's very important to have people like yourself who have got that direct experience. You're out there at the front end with customers. I think we need to be having conversations that aren't just with organisations. It's got to be with the people delivering, and that makes your voice incredibly important in these discussions.
Well, yeah, absolutely. The big change that's coming is the whole point of the meat industry, the beef industry, has to change, and everybody has a little happy picture of grass-fed beef. That's my favourite at the moment is grass-fed beef. Every cattle based in Scotland, according to a lot of people, is grass-fed, stands in a field, has a lovely life. I'm sorry, it's nonsense. Absolute arrant nonsense. I'm not saying that beef in buyers is bad, but let's start telling the truth, because it's it's a fact of life. It's buyer beef. Now, if I can get my tuppence worth in, the Highlanders, the rare breeds, stuff like that, can go on to, with all due respect, pretty crappy ground that is used for little else. We aren't in the sort of plains in Norfolk where you acres and acres of ground that you can do what you like with. We've got a lot of hill farms. You're getting good meat out of proper, sustainable farms. As I tend to. But you know what I mean? It's Highlanders, for instance, that's one that I like Highland cattle. Mm-hmm. It works well. You don't have to put them in sheds, you don't have vets out to them all the time, and you can, as long as you've got good butchers that know what they're doing and selling the product well, there's a huge market for that. Mm-hmm. And more as we're going on, you're going to get less and less, I think, of the real crap end, the rubbish end of the meat industry, the mechanically recovered this, that, and God knows what. It's got to be quality, it's got to move up. We're going to be eating a lot less beef meat in general. That's a fact. No point in hiding for it. And bring it on. I say, let's do what we're doing, eat less, but eat a lot better. Mm-hmm. Just welfare, where it's coming from, a bit of provenance, the whole bit. God, I mean, we have been working this week on a vegetarian burger for one of my outlets. My father will be spinning in his grave. But, like I said, I'm pragmatic. I've got 35, 36 wages to pay. I've got to do what I've got to do, even vegetarian burgers.
I'm going to have to tie things up there, but thank you everybody for tuning in today as well. And can I just thank our 5 very interesting panellists as well. You've added so many interesting things to this debate, and I really hope this is something that will have lots of thoughts that will probably continue for weeks, months and years to come as we see some progress within supporting our small red abattoirs as well. But thank you very much, everyone.